Every morning, before you made coffee, before you got dressed, a man came to your door carrying a block of ice the size of a small suitcase. You opened the top of your icebox, he dropped it in, and you paid him for the privilege of keeping your milk cold for another day. If he was late, your butter went soft. If you forgot to drain the melt pan underneath, your kitchen floor paid the price. This was not an inconvenience people complained about. It was simply Tuesday. For roughly 3 generations of American households, mechanical refrigeration did not exist in any practical domestic form. The icebox, a wooden cabinet insulated with sawdust or cork, fitted with a compartment for a harvested ice block, was the technology of daily life. The ice itself came from frozen lakes and rivers in the northern states, cut in winter, packed in insulated warehouses, and shipped by rail across the country throughout the summer. At its peak, the American natural ice industry was moving millions of tons annually, employing thousands of workers in cutting, storage, and delivery. The route driver was as routine a figure in a neighborhood as the milkman or the postman. The system worked. That was also its vulnerability. The constraint that would eventually destroy the ice delivery economy was not a shortage of ice or a failure of logistics. It was the basic physics of the problem itself. Natural ice was seasonal, geographically limited, and biologically risky. Warm winters meant thin harvests. Delivery to southern cities required long rail journeys and heavy losses to melt. More critically, harvested river ice was often contaminated with the same water it came from. Water that carried bacteria, industrial runoff, and waste from cities upstream. By the late 19th century, public health officials were drawing direct connections between contaminated ice and outbreaks of typhoid fever. The industry that kept food cold was, in some documented cases, also making people sick. Engineers and inventors had understood the theoretical principles of mechanical refrigeration since the mid-1800s. The basic idea was not complicated. Compress a gas, let it expand, and the expansion absorbs heat from its surroundings, producing cold. Ferdinand Carré demonstrated a working absorption system using ammonia in the 1850s. American inventor Jacob Perkins had patented a vapor compression cycle even earlier in 1834. But knowing the principle and building something reliable enough, cheap enough, and safe enough for a residential kitchen were entirely different problems. Early mechanical refrigeration systems were large, loud, expensive, and filled with toxic or flammable refrigerants, ammonia, sulfur dioxide, methyl chloride. They belonged in meatpacking plants and breweries, not next to a family's bread box. The turning point came not from a single inventor, but from a convergence of industrial capacity, chemical research, and commercial pressure in the 1920s and 1930s. General Motors and Frigidaire, along with other manufacturers, began producing electric refrigerators designed for home use. The machines were still expensive. A 1920s electric refrigerator could cost the equivalent of several months of a working-class wage. But the price dropped steadily across the decade as manufacturing scaled up. The more consequential chemical breakthrough came in 1930, when a team working with General Motors and DuPont developed Freon, a chlorofluorocarbon refrigerant that was stable, non-toxic in normal exposure, and non-flammable. Freon did not solve every problem, but it removed the most immediate safety objection that had slowed residential adoption. Suddenly, the argument against a mechanical refrigerator in the home was mainly price, not danger. Here is how the mechanism actually worked, and why it mattered for daily behavior. A compressor, driven by an electric motor, pressurizes refrigerant gas. That pressurized gas moves through coils where it releases heat to the surrounding air and condenses into a liquid. The liquid then passes through an expansion valve, drops in pressure rapidly, and evaporates. And that evaporation pulls heat out of the insulated cabinet around it. The inside of the box gets cold. The process runs continuously in a cycle, maintaining a stable temperature without any human intervention. No block of ice melting down to nothing over 18 hours. No melt pan to empty. No delivery schedule to organize your morning around. That change in how the technology worked quietly reorganized how households operated. With a reliable mechanical unit, people could shop less frequently. Leftovers became genuinely safe to store. Meals could be planned across several days, rather than built around what was fresh that morning. The cultural assumption that food preparation required daily vigilance began to loosen. Frozen and pre-prepared foods became commercially viable because there was finally a chain of reliable cold from the factory to the store to the home. The grocery store itself changed shape. The era of the large refrigerated display case accelerated, which changed what stores could stock and how far in advance they could receive deliveries. A technology that began as a kitchen appliance quietly restructured the entire food distribution system behind it. The cost side of this story is real and documented, and it deserves more than a footnote. The ice delivery industry did not fade gently. Hundreds of thousands of workers, cutters, packers, stable workers, and route drivers lost their livelihoods as electric refrigeration spread through American homes across the 1930s and 1940s. The natural ice harvest, once an enormous seasonal industry anchored in states like Maine, New York, and Illinois, effectively ceased to exist as a commercial enterprise. The route driver, who had been as essential to the neighborhood as any utility worker, became unnecessary. That disruption was real to the people inside it, even if the refrigerator represented a genuine improvement in public health and daily convenience for the households that could afford one. There is an honest complication worth naming. The refrigerator's safety record was not perfect during the transition years. Early residential units with toxic refrigerants did cause accidents, and the mechanical design of early sealed refrigerators introduced a new and documented hazard. The doors latched from the outside only, with no internal release mechanism. Children who climbed inside discarded units to play, a documented behavior during the scrap and salvage years of the 1940s and 1950s, could become trapped and suffocate. Deaths from this cause were recorded and publicized enough that the United States Congress passed the Refrigerator Safety Act in 1956, which required that all refrigerators manufactured and sold in the United States be openable from the inside. The magnetic door seal that replaced the mechanical latch solved the entrapment problem and became the standard design across the industry by around 1958. The refrigerator that was invented partly to make food safer had, in one specific design failure, introduced a separate category of preventable death before that failure was corrected by law. Today, household mechanical refrigeration is so deeply embedded in the infrastructure of daily life that its absence is experienced as an emergency. A power outage lasting more than a day triggers genuine anxiety about food safety. The cold chain, the unbroken sequence of refrigeration from producer to distributor to retailer to home, underlies the entire modern food supply in wealthy countries. Foods that could not have existed commercially before reliable domestic refrigeration are now dietary staples. The ice delivery route, which once represented the most advanced cold storage logistics available to an ordinary family, is a memory that barely registers in living recollection. What replaced it does not announce itself. It simply hums. What the refrigerator's story actually demonstrates is how a constraint embedded in one technology the biological and logistical limits of harvested natural ice, created the commercial urgency to develop something fundamentally different. The solution that arrived was not an improvement on the icebox. It was a replacement built on different physics, different chemistry, and a different relationship between the household and the systems that served it. The daily dependency did not disappear. It just became invisible, humming quietly in the corner of the kitchen, no longer requiring anyone to knock on the door. And when the design of that quiet machine turned out to carry its own hidden danger, it took an act of federal legislation to correct it. That pattern, invention solving one problem, introducing another, then requiring a separate intervention to close the new gap, is not unique to the refrigerator. It is closer to a description of how most consequential technologies actually move through the world. Visual reconstructions are illustrative. Facts and interpretations are based on the sources listed in the description.